Hey, before we get started with the show, we want to let you guys know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is sponsored by Audible.com.
That's right. They have more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products. They're the leading audiobook publishers, and you can choose such comics-related titles as Sean Howe's Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, and David Haydew's The 10-Cent Plague.
Get a free audiobook of your choice at www.audibletrial.com/comicsalternative. That's audibletrial.com/comicsalternative and get started today. This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Tillie Walden.
Countdown for blast off. X-5, 4, 3, 2, X-1, fire.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode of our interview show, we have the pleasure of speaking with Tillie Walden. She is the author of a book that's coming out in a few days, The End of Summer. She's a great new talent, and I have a great time talking with her. But before we get to that interview, we want to let all our listeners know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the good folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There you'll find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are at 20 to 35% off cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some incredibly unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials are at 45% off cover price. Sometimes at 50% off cover price. But many times, the discounts go higher from there.
And as you have come to expect, it is always bundle madness over at DCB Service, and June is no exception. We've got a 10-issue Valiant bundle, a 5-issue Vertigo bundle, and more for 50% off.
That's right. They have specials I can't even make sense of because they're so plentiful and so deep, it doesn't seem humanly possible.
Yeah, you just can't wrap your head around it, you know?
No, but you may as well take advantage of what they do offer, and to do that, you have to go to their website, dcbservice.com. Go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs, and after you do get your comics there, please be sure to drop them a line and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
Andy, I had a really good time talking with Tillie Walden the other day about her upcoming new book, The End of Summer, and I know that you had wanted to be a part of this conversation as well, but you just couldn't join us, so you missed a good time, my friend.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear what you guys discuss. Now, Tillie Walden is a fairly young creator, is that right?
Yes, and in fact, I didn't know until right before we started our recording, she is as old as my son, Zachary, and that means she's 19 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I felt, and I kind of joked with her off air that there seems to be something a little unseemly, you know, in me interviewing someone so young. But no, she was wonderfully enthusiastic and confident. You wouldn't know that she was 19 and a first-time creator. I mean, she's done comics before, but this is her first book. Mm-hmm. She seems like fully developed coming out of the womb. I remember when Philip Roth came out with his first book, Saul Bellow reviewed it, and he made that comparison. He said, this is not like a brand new author because he comes fully developed from the womb. And so that's what I felt about Tillie Walden and her book, The End of Summer. So you want to listen to what we talked about?
Yeah, I'm eager to hear this.
I'm very pleased to have on the Comics Alternative podcast Tillie Walden. She is the author of the brand new book, The End of Summer, and that's going to be coming out from Avery Hill Press. Tillie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And, I was joking right before we started to record. I'll go ahead and say this now on the air that, you have the distinction of being the youngest guest that we've ever had on this podcast.
I am honored.
Yes, or at least the youngest creator on the show. So yeah. Now, this is your very first book, correct?
And my very first podcast.
And your very first. Wow, I didn't know that. So
yep.
Boy, I feel honored and humbled.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So, for our listeners who don't yet know about The End of Summer, your book, how would you describe the story to them? How would you whet their appetite?
I would say The End of Summer it's definitely a drama, and it's a family drama, I think, that is focused on the lives of this fairly royal family while they are trapped in their sprawling castle for winter. And it follows Lars, who is our narrator and probably the most important character, through his journey with his siblings and through him trying to understand his own life. I always have trouble summing it up because when I try and think of everything that happens in the book, I want to immediately give away everything that happens. It's about Lars, and it's about his relationship with his twin sister, which is something I drew on from my own life, from my relationship with my own twin brother. And it's definitely a tragedy. And it moves quickly, and it's pretty action-packed.
Now, I wanted to ask you about the genesis of this project, and I assume that the genesis is embedded in the fact that you did dedicate this book, as you say at the end, to your twin brother. So is that where you got the idea for the story?
It's not where I got the idea from the story, but it ended up becoming a large part of the story. I don't ever come up with ideas thinking of narratives. I always start out coming up with 2 or 3 things that I want to draw, because I only ever really make comics that have, worlds or characters that I'm really interested in drawing. And so I basically thought of giant cats and this sort of crazy looking house. And once I could imagine the world, I thought, I need to come up with some characters. And I figured, who else, why not me and my twin brother? And from there, with thinking of my relationship with my brother and all those visual elements, the story just kind of came into being.
So you started not with any kind of narrative element, but
Nope.
with images like the large cat, whose name in the book is
Nemo.
Nemo, which is great, perfect for a
Thank
comic.
you.
And also this beautiful interior landscape. And for those who haven't seen the book yet, and in fact, I would say that the interior of this, what do you call it, a castle, mansion?
I don't know. It's maybe, like a mansion.
A world? I mean,
it's kind of a little world. It
yes.
really is.
And it becomes a character almost in and of itself in the book.
I think so. Well, and I was sort of weird about it because I'm really bad about never doing any planning. And so when I started this, I didn't do a single drawing to plan what it would look like. And so every page was me figuring out what it would be. And the more pages I drew, the more I just kept building the space and drawing new backgrounds and new places until it really became, kind of this twisting, winding, giant place that really, I think, is hugely important to the story.
And I know one thing that the first time I read this, I had to almost do a reading double take because I wanted to make sure that I understood what I was reading.
Right.
At the very beginning, we learned that this family, and of course their servants and everybody who attends to them, so it's a large community. They're getting ready to basically batten down the hatches. They're closing everything up for the winter, but this is a different kind of winter than we get on Earth, or at least in most places on Earth, because this lasts, as they say, for about 3 years?
Yeah, about 3 years, or that's what it's predicted to last. They don't really know.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute, they're going to hold themselves up for 3 years. And okay, so what kind of location is this? I was asking myself as I was reading this the first time. So, I mean, where did you come up with the idea of this violent, long, very, very cold and dangerous, as we learn later, winter, keeping the family in for that long?
Well, I think part of it actually came from I moved to Vermont for school this past year, and I think I was really afraid of the winter that was coming.
And you're originally from Texas, so I can see that.
Yeah, so I really didn't know what to expect, and I heard only horror stories, and I really liked the idea of taking the long winter and just multiplying it as large as I could and seeing how the characters would react. And I actually drew the book in winter, so while I was drawing it, I was, trapped in looking at snow, and yeah, that had a really big effect on me. And I've really pondered where on earth this book would take place. I really don't know if it would, because I also don't think there are cats that are the size of Nemo. So it's definitely in its own little reality. But I also kind of think that their prediction for the winter is a little dramatized. I mean, I think the family itself is kind of over dramatic, and I think their fears of the winter are sometimes just not totally true.
Now, I want to talk about the drama of the family, but before we leave the setting, I got to ask you, at any time in making The End of Summer, did at least the film version or maybe the original novel, The Shining, come to mind?
Yes, it did. That's very interesting that you bring that up. I watched The Shining for the first time a few months before I drew this book. And after watching The Shining, I then watched the documentary about The Shining, which showed how it was kind of, purposefully made to seem, very unsettling with rooms and windows that weren't really possible. And I was just totally amazed by that. And at the same time, so I was watching the movie The Shining about this crazy hotel, and I was working in a hotel at the same time. So I would be walking around at work just really thinking about this place. And that was definitely in my head when I was putting together their mansion.
And there are creepy twins in the Shining movie.
There are creepy twins. I don't think I ever made that connection.
Wow.
You're right.
Except the twins, Lars and his sister in the book, I mean, they're not creepy.
Yeah, they're not. They're not. They're very sweet.
Yeah. And the reason I ask about The Shining is when I read at the very beginning that they're getting ready to lock everything up, getting ready for the winter, and this gigantic mansion, house, castle that they're in, I thought, The Shining.
Yeah, you're totally right.
And they talk about people going possibly crazy. Lars and his sister are talking at first about who do you think will go crazy first?
Yeah. Definitely.
So all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Exactly. I should have put that on a wall somewhere. Just snuck it in there. There are a lot of walls in it, so I could have really snuck anything I wanted in there.
That'd be a little Easter egg.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Now, in terms of the family drama that's going on here, now Lars is someone who he's a little bit of a loner, or if that's not the best way of describing it, he's someone who probably feels most comfortable when he's with his twin sister.
Definitely.
And her name is I'm blanking.
Maya.
Maya, that's right.
Yeah.
And he seems to be the most reasonable, level-headed individual, at least that we have access to. I mean, there's Nicholas. He seems to be...
He's pretty normal, yeah. He's pretty level-headed.
Because he's going to, as Lars and Maya call him, the heir apparent.
Yes, he is.
To the father. But the rest of the family seems to have some kind of issues. And you address this early on once, the building is closed up and everything's locked up for the winter, and they sit down to eat, and we get an introduction to the main members of the family. And so describe how you set this up.
Yeah, so it's Lars looking around the table and just, thinking about what he thinks of each family member. And I think, it's a subtle way of starting to say there are some serious mental health issues in this family that aren't really being addressed. But I think the introduction is kind of through Lars's fairly logical eyes, where he doesn't really have the proper words like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. He can just, he notices how his older brother Pear scrapes his teeth on his fork as he eats. And that's just his way, Lars's, way of saying that something is a little off about his brother. And yeah, that's the first time you meet everybody before all the stories really begin.
Yeah, and then the father, he smokes 2 pipes and then eats chocolate pudding.
Yeah. Yeah, he is the kind of guy who has his own taste, and his taste, that is what goes. He won't do anything else.
I want to get back to something that you've mentioned a couple of times, and that is the narrative being told through the perspective of Lars. And you just described him as someone who doesn't have the language or the experience to really put into words accurately what's going on around him with his family. And it strikes me, once you said that, it's similar to this kind of naive narrator that we have in, let's say, like Huckleberry Finn or Catcher in the Rye, where you have these protagonist narrators who are describing the world around them, but they're unable to really grasp and understand everything and put it into words, as you put it. And so that gets to one of my experiences in reading this book, and I've read it multiple times. Because, well, one, wanting to talk with you on the podcast, but also in reading it several times, I say, okay, so there are parts of this that are still ambiguous and unclear to me, and if I continue reading this, I'll find what I've been missing. Am I reading something too quickly? Am I missing a little cue here or there? But even after the 4th time of reading it, there's still parts of it that are a little ambiguous. But it was intentionally that way. Yes.
Yeah, I think I wanted there to be this gap between, the reader is really connected with what Lars is seeing, but I'm putting in very small cues visually that a lot more is going on that Lars will never understand. And so I think the story can work just from Lars's perspective, but I wanted there to be elements of more going on. So it made, so it was more interesting to reread. And so I don't know. I think it leaves more of like this unsettled feeling in your stomach as you read it, because it's all a little fuzzy. But I also did that because I think for Lars as a person, he really just doesn't know what's going on, and he sees a lot around him, and his visual world is so complicated and dense. Even just the background, like his bedroom is just it's hard to look at. There's so much detail. And I don't think he ever feels like he can really see all the detail around him.
Yeah. Now Lars is ill, but we don't know exactly what the problem is with him. But he's in ill health, and he has an attendant, Hector.
Yes, Hector, his servant/friend.
Yeah, his man Friday.
Yeah.
Or, since I made a Huck Finn reference, his Jim.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best comparison, but yeah, he's someone who works with him, who's very empathetic to him, and we see Lars. I mean, not only is he innocent and not able to accurately describe or understand everything that's going on around him, but there are several occasions where he's just out of it. He can do nothing but sleep. He's always tired. He gets dizzy. He passes out, and there's in other words, a danger of him dying. As we go through this narrative, but we don't know exactly what his issues are.
Yeah, I think, especially when it comes to that part of it, when I was younger, I was ill quite a bit, and so I was really drawing upon my fuzzy memories of how it felt to kind of lie around and be dizzy and pass out and not really feel like you're yourself. And so I really put that into Lars. And I also wanted it to be where when you're a kid and you're sick, I feel like a lot of times you don't really understand what's happening to you. And that can have a big effect on you. And so I wanted to put Lars in that situation and that question is never answered in the book, where you never really get to find out what exactly is wrong with him.
Right. And, I tend to privilege ambiguity in narratives. I don't like things tied up neatly at the end or otherwise in most stories that I read. I mean, I like the fact that I have to read it multiple times to at least attempt to understand something that I may not fully grasp, at the end. So, because there are other situations that we really don't have answers to. So, for instance, Maya, I think we have a better grasp of Lars's relationship with Maya than we do Maya herself.
Yes.
Because she's someone, we were talking about unstable family members. I mean, she may or may not be that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, it's interesting, the dynamic between Lars and Maya, because those characters, they're not, I didn't assign me as one and my brother as the other. They're both elements from both of us. And recently, as I've, become a teenager and I've grown up, I've found that there are just parts of my twin brother that I don't understand, yet they're at the same time, I feel very connected to him. And so I really put that in there where Lars really doesn't get Maya. I think he thinks that she's dramatic and confusing, but he does know, the one thing he does know for sure is that he loves her and it's unconditional.
Mm-hmm. And also some other ambiguities. I mean, there's some, I don't want to give, really anything away, no spoilers here.
Right.
But, there are some nefarious things that are going on inside
yes.
with certain family members. But even that is unclear. So not only is Lars not able to see clearly what's going on around him, but even as readers, it's like we see something askance, a slant out of the corner of our eye, so we don't get the full picture. So it's like, okay, so who is it that just did that, and what is it that they did?
Well, and I think I think what I was thinking with that is that feeling when you hear you lean your head, you try and listen in on your parents, or you're walking around the house and you hear maybe part of a phone call, or you hear someone mention your name. You just see this slight thing. I think that's a pretty universal childhood experience of getting bits and pieces, but, kind of forgetting about it because you don't realize the significance because you're a kid and you don't really understand. And so I put that in there just because I felt like it was true to Lars's perspective. And if he was older, I think he would have been able to really look at his family and understand the dynamics better and the bad stuff that's going on. But, he's 11 when the book starts. And he's also very wrapped up in his own problems.
Mm-hmm. And am I looking at the visuals correctly? Toward the end, do we see someone who is tied up?
Yes.
Okay, because I wasn't sure. I thought, okay, I think that's the case, but I wasn't sure. So even visually, there's that ambiguity embedded in the narrative.
Right. Well, and I imagined I would get into this at some point, where a lot of my inspiration for comics comes from musicals, and how when I listen to a lot of musicals, you hear, sometimes up to 4 voices singing all at once, and the voice that rises to the top of the melody usually changes, and that always gets me thinking about my stories and how I want there to be this sort of musical feeling of there's a lot going on, but an overarching narrative or voice that always rises to the top. And in this book, I think that's Lars's voice. Because there are like a couple moments in the book where there are maybe 5 different stories going on all at once. But what keeps you through is Lars's voice. And that comes from musicals. That's where that is inspired.
Yeah, because there are a number of, you could call them conversation or maybe even monologues that are going on at the same time as, I guess you would call our main story with Mars, but that are just beneath the surface. And I think part of that aforementioned ambiguity is that you just don't hear those conversations or speeches as clearly because Lars's is the one that is most noticeable.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's also, I'm a lot about, or what's important to me in comics is pacing and tempo. And I find when you're leading up to a big moment, the more I can build a certain level of chaos and a feeling of you don't really know what's going on, and then letting that open up to a sometimes shocking amount of clarity. That's really big for me. And I think about that a lot, and it's done very purposefully.
So this is your first graphic novel, but what other work have you done before this?
Before this, I've done almost entirely short form work. I started just in high school drawing short comics, and then now I'm at school at the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont, and so I spent my first year of school here drawing a lot of short stories. But yeah, this is my first long story that I've ever done.
Okay. Were your shorter works, have they been collected elsewhere in anthologies or whatnot?
Not really. Most of them are just for free on my website, just so people can read them. I do have some work that's going to be in some anthologies coming up. But yeah, I'm very new to the scene and just very new to comics in general. So I'm still, my work is still getting its way out there.
Yeah, I know when your publisher, Avery Hill, contacted me the other week, and they'd mentioned The End of Summer and Tillie Walden. I didn't know who Tillie Walden was, and so I did a Google search, and I looked you up, and I thought, I'm wondering if you may be interested in an interview. So there you go. I have you on the show now. But, I'm curious. Now, this is your first book. You said outside of your website, it's not like you were publishing before this.
Yeah.
So how did you get connected with Avery Hill?
Yeah, so, okay, it's kind of an interesting story. I was in high school. I was in 12th grade, which was a year ago, I think. And I had been drawing comics, and my dad came up to me one day, and he was like, Tillie, you need to start a Twitter, and you need to make a website, and you need to start getting your stuff out there. And I was like, Dad, this is ridiculous. I don't want to do this, but I did it anyways. And so I posted images on Twitter, and I had comics on my website, and I just kind of kept trucking along. And then one day, I was at like a burger joint outside of my school, and I got this email from Avery Hill that said they had seen my work on Twitter, which had led them to my website, and they had seen my short comics, and they were interested in maybe working with me. It was all very like introductory, and it wasn't very concrete, but they said, we're interested. And I was just, I was blown away, and I had no idea what was going on. And I was like, I was trying to think about that, but I was also very worried about like a math test at the same time. So I wasn't really thinking about it. And I was eating a burger, which I was really enjoying. And so I emailed them back, and I was really confused, and I was like, this is awesome, I think. I didn't know I was publisher worthy yet. I didn't really think that I was. I didn't think my work was polished enough yet. And I said, I'd love to work with you, but can we wait until I'm done with high school? Because I really want to, make sure my grades are okay and not lose focus. And they emailed back like, we had no idea you were in high school. Like, of course we'll wait. And that was that. And it was just this small exchange. And then a couple of months later, I got another email, and they said, hey, do you want to, what they offered was they wanted me to do a book of short stories with them, because that's what they had seen on my website, all my short form work. And at that point I had, graduated high school, and I had started CCS here in Vermont, and I was feeling increasingly confident in my abilities. And so I said to them, nah, I don't want to do short stories. Why don't you let me just make a graphic novel for you? I've never done one before, but let's try it. Why don't you let me try? And I don't know if they were fully convinced, and I was kind of worried that because I am a teenager, I was worried they wouldn't take me seriously. But they did, and we made it happen.
Wow, you've just made the case for swagger.
Yeah, I think I told my future editor when we were talking about my idea for a book. I told him, Ricky, I've got this idea for a book all worked out. It's all in my head. And he emailed back like, great, let's hear it. And at that moment, I had no idea for a book whatsoever. None at all. And I remember because I was home on winter vacation from school. And so that's when I was like, okay, well, now if I want to do this, you have to sit down and do the work and figure it out. And I did. And I sent them my idea, and I drew them a couple drawings of Lars and of Nemo. And they were like, we love it. Let's do it. And then I started on it right then.
Okay, so you just finished up your first year at Center for Cartoon Studies, correct?
Yes.
Now, you had just gotten there. You're contacted by this publisher over in the UK.
Right.
I would guess this doesn't happen often to students when they start Center for Cartoon Studies.
I don't think it does. I don't think it's very common. And on top of that, the biggest difficulty was I don't think many people because the program at CCS is very intense. It's a master's program, and it's very serious, and it's a lot of work. And I don't think a lot of people are doing graphic novels in their free time while doing the curriculum. And when I started the book, I honestly didn't know if I could do it while keeping up with my comics schoolwork. So it was pretty weird, and I didn't actually tell any of my friends about it for a while, because I thought I just really, I just need to like work on this and be in myself and just try. And I also didn't mention to the guys at Avery Hill how much other work I had to do outside of the book, because I think it would have scared them. But yeah, the way I ended up making it work is I just woke up really early every morning, and before class, from like 4 a.m. until class would start at 10, I would just work on my book. And then in the evenings, I would work on comics for school.
That's dedication. Wow. I had thought, okay, so I read this, and, in the author info at the end, it says, you're currently a student at the Center for Cartoon Studies. And I thought, okay, this is probably something like a thesis that she's working on, or it resulted from a major class project, or maybe even a senior seminar. But a senior seminar, usually a capstone. That's the very end, right?
Yeah.
You're currently a student, so that wasn't connected to your schoolwork at all, though.
No, and actually it's a 2-year program, and the second year you do a thesis project. So I will be doing a thesis and another graphic novel when the next school year starts. But I did this during my second semester of school, and the hardest part was at the end of the semester. I had a very big final project due, and at the same time I had to be finishing my book, and that was quite a crunch.
But you were successful, right?
I was successful.
You did pass.
I did pass, and I did a good job. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow. So this is even more impressive now. So for your major project for next year, which will be your thesis, you're going to do another graphic novel?
Oh yeah, for sure. Doing this book proved to me that I really enjoy long form work, and this book was only, I think, about 80 pages, and I think for my thesis next year I'm going to do something much longer.
Huh. Okay. So now, will this be something else that you're talking with Avery Hill about?
I don't know. We haven't talked about it yet, but possibly.
And, getting to Avery Hill, this is one of those publishers that I would guess the majority of our listeners aren't aware of.
Yeah.
And there are several British publishers that I think do just incredible work, but they just don't get as much traction here in the United States.
Yeah.
I think over the past year or two, we've been hearing more and more good things from Nobrow.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they have been getting the attention of American readers more and more. Same thing with Self-Made Hero. Now, Self-Made Hero has
Self-Made Hero.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. But they have the luxury of being distributed through Abrams, and so that really helps.
Right.
And of course, Abrams does beautiful visual books. So,
oh yeah. Books.
Yeah, but it's those kind of publishers that aren't well known here, because if you're talking about alternative comics in the United States, or at least in North America. So I mean, if you're going for the bigger ones, it's people like Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly. Yeah, but even smaller than that, there could be, let's say, Ad House, or in Canada, Conundrum.
I'm thinking of like Uncivilized. Retrofit.
Retrofit, Uncivilized, those as well. The kind of, I don't know if you would call them boutique mini publishers, but it's something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I think people know more about Retrofit and Uncivilized and alternative comics and Ad House than they do Nobrow and Avery Hill. So now, right before we were to record the interview, I did a search on Amazon to see if I could find The End of Summer there. I wasn't finding it, and I don't even see many, if any, Avery Hill books listed, at least in the United States, Amazon website.
Yeah, so I believe the book is going to be sold through, I think they have a big cartel store or something through their website, and it ships to the U.S., but I don't believe they're on Amazon.
So maybe that's something you can talk to the press about.
Definitely.
Get them more exposure. Now, so eventually it will, people can get it through Amazon, but for now, how can they order a copy of the book?
Through the Avery Hill website.
Okay, so directly through them, they don't go to your personal website. There's no link.
Yeah, no. I'll have a link on my personal website as well, but yeah.
They'll carry people over there.
Yes.
To the Avery Hill. What about digital in terms of comiXology?
I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be available on Sequential.
Oh, okay, even better.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm not sure, but I know Avery Hill is definitely, they have a lot of books on Sequential, and I assume my book will be on that eventually.
Well, talking about the digital medium, you mentioned that you did start to create comics and put them on various social media outlets, and that's how you were discovered. Have you thought about doing webcomics?
I have. It's sort of hard for me because I'm really not a fan of the internet or of social media in general. I don't even have a Facebook, and the only reason I even started putting stuff online was because my dad is also kind of my marketing guy, and he wanted me to, and he was right. You're right, Dad. But I have thought about it, but I think for now I'm really focused on print, because I really like seeing my comics in print, and I feel like I'm kind of pretentious about traditional media. I don't use a computer for anything. I'm all, pen and paper, and the only thing I have to use is a scanner now, because that's how the book is printed. But I don't know, and webcomics seem like a great way to get your work out there right now, so maybe it'll be something I do in the future.
Well, there have been a number of cases recently where people who got big, fan followings with certain webcomics that they've created have gone on to get book deals and even work for the big two.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I would be totally into that. That would be great.
And I think one of the best examples of that right now is Noelle Stevenson.
Oh, yeah. Is that becoming like an animation, I think, that I just saw? Are
you talking about Lumberjane?
Yeah.
I
may have just seen that. I don't know. But yeah,
I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But, before, I think that, she got to do Lumberjanes because of the success of Nimona.
Yeah.
Which is now up for an Eisner Award this year under the webcomic digital comic category.
Yeah, I always think of Kate Beaton when it comes to like web presence because of her. I believe Hark a Vagrant was a webcomic first, and now it's in print.
Yeah, but when I think of her, I think of more, let's say, the alternative community, and I mean that in a very loose way. In other words, it's someone that the more popular comics readers may not be aware of. I mean, for instance, if you gravitate toward Drawn and Quarterly books, of course you know her work.
Right.
But, she's not someone who's published by, let's say, Boom Studios.
Yeah.
Which, has a wider readership.
I'd say it's more indie.
Yes, yeah, indie. Yeah, and, those terms, indie, alternative, they're very loosey and goosey. And
they
all
are.
that.
I don't entirely know what they mean.
Oh, yeah, and we don't either, and we're called the Comics Alternative.
That works.
Yeah. So, okay, so what other classes do you take? This is the first time, not only is this the first time we've interviewed someone that is younger than 20, but I think it's the first time we've interviewed someone who is still in college on the Comics Alternative. So, at the Center for Cartoon Studies, what is a typical curriculum?
So, it's a little different from a regular college because I didn't actually go to college. I went from high school straight to this program, and it's it's not a lot of hours of classes, but you have classes like Cartooning Studio, which is, with someone like Jason Lutz or James Sturm. And it's, all about drawing a lot of comics in class and talking about comics. We have, a comics history class with Steve Bissett. We have a class called Publication Workshop, which is all about book design and learning Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator, which is a really hard class. But it's great, and it's taught by John Chad and Luke Howard. And then we have one of the great parts of the Center for Cartoon Studies is you have a visiting artist come every week. People like Farrell Dalrymple and Danielle Corsetto come every week and give a lecture and teach.
Wow, because I was going to ask you about, who do you have as instructors, but here you are, mentioning, of course, Sturm and then Lutz and wow, and then Dalrymple coming to guest. Man. So what's it like working with those guys?
Oh God, it's so amazing. I feel so lucky and that I came here, and I'm so happy to be a part of the program. And working with those guys, it's just amazing. They're all pros. They all know what they're doing. They all have books out, and they're all still drawing comics. And it's just wonderful. There's this atmosphere of constant creativity, and everyone here completely knows and understands comics and is interested in comics. And it's pretty amazing. And I feel like I'm getting an in-depth look at comics that I wouldn't get otherwise. I feel like I could have just gone through life and gone to college and made comics on the side. But doing this, I'm learning all of the ins and outs. And yeah, the teachers, it's also, we're in a really small town in Vermont, so it's a little bit isolated at times. But the teachers, we're kind of like a family, and they love the students, and we all love them, and it's just a great relationship to have.
I noticed in this most recent issue of the Previews catalog that we have, or we're going to soon have, new issues, finally, of Lutz's Berlin.
Yes.
And it's been so long since we've had those, and so I'm wondering if there's a connection between you starting school there and Berlin coming back after a hiatus.
Yeah, so Jason has been teaching, and he actually took a sabbatical for one of my semesters to work on Berlin. But he's been working on it this whole time. When school started, we got to see him. He brought in original pages, and we got to see him drawing it right in front of us, which was a great experience. But yeah, he's working on it. He's been working on it this whole time. I think he's been busy because he has kids and is teaching, and just life gets busy. But yeah, I saw a stack of new Berlin pages a little while ago.
So it's not unusual for your instructors to share with the students the work that they're in the process of creating. So you get some, behind-the-scenes, early glimpses into this stuff.
Well, and I think it's a vital part of the program. Because we want, the teachers are sharing their art as well as, we're sharing our art every day. And so, we'll have a class where James Sturm will show us all of his sketchbooks. And it's nice, because it's nice seeing that you have teachers who you have a lot to learn from, but you're seeing them in action.
Huh. So now I don't want you to, suggest that, you're playing favorites or you have a favorite, but what is one of the most memorable instructor/creator experiences you've had over the past year there at the Center for Cartoon Studies?
I think the first semester before Jason took a sabbatical, our class Cartooning Studio with him was just really special. Not only did we get some really phenomenal lectures from him, I'm especially thinking of the one about Tezuka, and I'm a big Tezuka fan. And hearing Jason talk about Tezuka was amazing. And when we're in class, it's like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. class. So we're with Jason all day. And some of the best moments were when he'd give us these insane assignments where we'd have to draw something really fast and trade it and mark something out, make every character Batman and then, put them in a drama, a bunch of crazy stuff. And what I didn't realize at the time is how much that was shaping me and everyone else as a creator, just really sitting in a room with so many talented people and sitting with Jason Lutz and and just talking about art and making art, and it was just so inspiring. And comics can get really hard, and they take a lot of time out of the day. So I feel like having a fresh source of inspiration is really important, and that's what that gave all of us.
Wow. Now, see, talking about this, you have me wanting to go back and reread Jar of Fools, which I haven't read in years.
Yes, you should.
Wow, I'll have to fish that out. I mean, I'm looking right now at my I get the individual issues, of course, but I have the 2 volumes of Berlin here, and I've been meaning to get back to them because, my rationale is, well, it's been a long time since I read it. It's been on hiatus. Maybe if I read it, then, something will be in the air and new issues will come out. But
a certain electricity that will cause them to appear.
Exactly. So now you're getting ready. As we record this, you're preparing to go over to the UK for the big release of the end of summer. So tell me, what all do you have in store?
Well, so I'm going over to London for LCAF, which I believe is the same weekend as Heroes Con, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going for the launch of my book from Avery Hill, and that'll be the night before LCAF, and that'll be, a lot of chatting and signing. And then the next 2 days, the book will be available at LCAF at my publisher's table. And then I believe I'm doing another podcast while I'm there. But yeah, it's going to be good. I've never actually met my publishers because I'm in the US and they're in the UK. So it's going to be really great to finally meet them and see my book in person, which I haven't seen yet.
Wow. So, I mean, all that's impressive, but I have to say, I want to just underscore the fact that next week you will do another podcast. This is your first.
You guys will go down in history as my first podcast.
It's the first podcast to interview Tillie Walden.
Yes. And that'll go on my page. I don't know. Yeah. That's history now.
So have you been in the UK before?
I've never been to Europe. I've barely been out of the US, so it's kind of scary, but I'm really excited.
So yeah, I mean, this is a big deal. You're going over there for the first time. This is your book. You're going to meet your publisher. There's LCAF. Wow. It's
a lot of new stuff happening all at once. I mean, even doing this podcast is a very new thing. So,
well, I hope I've been approachable and gentle.
Oh, very. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. So, well, this is great. Now, do you have, outside of maybe, ideas for your thesis for next year, do you have any other ideas that are germinating for another long or even shorter form comic story?
I'm not entirely sure. I know I want to take a break from castles for a bit because that was a lot to draw. But I don't really know. I think I'm going to let my ideas come as they always have, just with, visuals popping into my head. And I mean, I know I'm not going to slow down anytime soon. I've been doing a lot of comics the past year, and I plan to keep doing a lot of comics. But what they're going to look like, I actually have no idea. And that's kind of exciting for me.
Well, didn't you say that's how you got End of Summer going?
Yeah, it is. I try to have faith in my process when I'm drawing and just sort of trust whatever is going to come out of it. Even if, I make a kind of bad comic, as long as I'm drawing comics, I'm happy.
So you already mentioned that if listeners wanted to get a copy of The End of Summer, they can go to the Avery Hill website, so they can easily do a search on that. But if they want to check out other works of yours, it's your website, tilliewalden.com?
That is correct, tilliewalden.com.
So that's TILLIEWALDEN.com. And you have some of your comics up there, your shorter comics that you mentioned earlier, some various sketches. And so this would be a good way for people to be introduced to your work as they're waiting for their copy of The End of Summer to arrive.
Definitely.
So, well, listen, Tillie, I want to thank you very much for first being on the podcast and second for being our very first podcast that you've ever done.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being the first podcast. I wouldn't have been able to have this experience without you guys. This was wonderful.
Yeah, our pleasure. So there you go, Andy, my conversation with Tillie.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on a copy of The End of Summer.
Yeah, it's a great book, and as I mentioned to Tillie on the show, on the interview, I haven't seen it yet on Amazon, and so it's not even listed in stock trades, I'm sure. But this is something that I'm hoping that in the coming weeks, once they release the book, and I think it's going to be released over the next week in the UK, once this interview goes up. Within that next week, it'll be released in the UK. They're having a launch party. Tillie, as she said in the interview, is heading over to London for this event. And so maybe soon our listeners can find it on the US Amazon.com website and many other places as well.
Well, good. I certainly look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it's a great book. And if you want to find great comics, you can't go wrong by visiting the website of our sponsor, and that is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. It's a wonderful place to get your funny books. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to get in touch with us and let us know the kind of things you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll see a tab that says Send Voicemail in the right-hand side of your browser. Click on that, and from the comfort of your own desktop or mobile device, you can send us a message through the wonders of SpeakPipe. It's very simple. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
And for the latest news and updates to our blog and the podcast, join us on Twitter. We are at the number 2 Guys with PhDs, and we appreciate everybody that retweets our tweets.
Yeah, thanks a lot for all of that. You can also get in touch with us via email. We're 2guys@comicsalternative.com. You can contact me directly at derek@comicsalternative.com. And Andy, how can they get in touch with you?
You can contact me at wolverton@comicsalternative.com.
You can also find us on Facebook, on Tumblr, on Instagram, and on Google+. We also have a YouTube channel, so if you consume your podcast that way, hey, check us out there. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn. But you can find every single one of our episodes, as well as our growing list of reviews and comics-related commentary that we put up on our blog, and that's at comicsalternative.com.
Yeah, those are all of the ways that you can contact us, so take advantage of all of them.
Yeah, and also participate on our forums. We enjoy that as well. And so however we hear from you, we look forward to doing so. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy.
We'll see you later.